runs maintenance over at TA Petro, Travel Centers of America? Well, that would be Kevin Lindsey, the head honcho, the Kurt Signetti of maintenance. By the way, welcome back, Kevin, as always, for Maintenance Matters, where we kind of figure out ways to prevent people from ever having to have conversations with you that go on way too long, and we instead have a conversation once a week to prevent that from happening. But I have to ask, big congratulations to the Indiana Hoosiers, who went from the losingest football team in college football history to national champions. You watching that game last night?
I watched that whole game last night, and I don't know if I can live up to any expectations you comparing me to Signetti now.
Good God Almighty! Good God Almighty! Both those teams came out. I mean, I said, oh, here we go again. Indiana's going to teach them. I just thought it was going to be a gradual wearing down after that first half. I kept saying that Mendoza had survived that first beginning of the game onslaught, and then kind of stabilized himself, and then it was 10-0, and I thought, okay, here we go. And then Miami said, nope, not going quietly, not going to do that. And, man, it came down to have you ever seen a game where every single play was like the most important play of the game? It was crazy.
Yeah,
it was an intense.
Yeah, no, that was a good and intense ball game for sure.
Yeah. It was just it was something else to behold, and we will see how everybody's teams do next year. We're now at that point now where all people can do is talk about what could be, and then we'll get a whole lot of top 25s that aren't based in any reality. Because I don't know if you know this, Indiana, after making the playoffs last year and returning so many starters, including a Heisman Trophy candidate, was ranked 24th in the preseason this year.
Yeah, right.
So. Yeah, I have a feeling not as many SEC teams are going to turn up in that top 25 this time around. I just have a feeling, and Paul Feinbaum can go pound sand for all I care, because he's not really an SEC homer; he's an Alabama homer. Let's just be real.
Exactly. Yeah,
I know what an SEC homer. Josh Pate is an SEC homer. Paul Feinbaum's a disgrace. Okay, there it is. That's my editorial for the day. How is the weather where you're at now? Because it's actually unseasonably cold down here.
About 12 degrees. Not too bad.
Well,
it's not single digits, so.
Because there's no wind. I mean, that's probably it, too. I mean, it's like that's what Chowder was talking about this morning, is that the lack of wind actually makes sometimes the most bitter of cold feel relatively okay. What is on the docket for today? We got so much we can dig into and places we can go. Where did we leave off, and where would you like to pick up?
Oh, we were talking about just getting things started in cold weather. So I felt like, there was even more we could talk about, dig into a little bit on this subject, before we got off the air last week. So
yeah, we did leave a lot on the table. Give us the 30,000-foot overviews, and then we'll catch up to where we left off and where we'd like to kind of pick up. So, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, we were talking about last week how, that diesel engine it takes so much energy to get it going, but especially when it's cold and the viscosity of oil that's in it and all that. All these different factors, and the load that puts on that electrical system is just, it's kind of crazy when you stop and think about it, because, when you kind of get into the physics of it, when it does get this cold outside and everything, everything contracts as it gets colder, when you get down to that atomic level, things kind of slow down, and there's shrinkage that occurs in electrical connections and all kinds of things. So all of a sudden you may end up with issues that you have never had before. And it could be something as simple as, one little connector, a little electrical terminal inside of a connector that quits making contact because as it got colder, the male and female sides of it just kind of separated almost and created an open circuit. And now you've got a sensor that a computer can't read, so it's never going to fire the starter off. So, there's so many of these little factors like that can occur out there. And, what's really frustrating about things like that is those are things you can't see. right? And you would have no idea that they could occur, but they are out there. So,
I was laughing about this. I actually took two notes this morning when looking over your notes and where we left off and where we picked up and the two analogies I think of is opening a door on a very cold day. You're in a warm house, and then you open that door, and it literally makes you yelp. I thought about that, and then I also thought about the fact that in the wintertime, and it happened to me this morning as well too, itchy skin. And
mm,
I kept thinking about that, the idea that, why do we put lotion on? Why do we put body lotion on? People say, I don't do that, all that stuff. And yet there they are basically rubbing their skin raw because their skin has dried out and cracked in the wintertime in a way that it doesn't do in the summer because your lubrication system, sweating, is actually working out great for you. And that's kind of the mentality you want to take, because I kept thinking about the intake of air. The idea, you start up an engine, we go back to air filters and all this stuff, but you start an engine up on a really cold day, you are pulling in, look, your engine's already cold, but it ain't as cold as the outside air is, and then you start that engine up, and that air intake, it can do damage instantly, right? I mean, you can
oh
do
yeah,
like instant damage by just, you get a couple of startups in a really couple of cold weeks, and you're doing a lot of rapid fire damage over the process of less than a month because of that constant pull-in of freezing cold air, right?
yeah, yeah. That no, it's a great point. And you get that cold air as it comes. Not only is it pulling it in, but in a turbocharged engine, it's getting as that engine turns over, that turbo starts trying to spool up, even though there's not necessarily hot exhaust going out. But as the pistons move up and down, they're still pushing air out, which is going to spin that turbo up, which is going to pull even more air in, even moving across points a little bit faster. So, you know, wind chill factor inside there. Think about that. It's
Well,
so
that's a
cold.
great point. I mean, I kept thinking about that, but really, what you're doing is you're inducing a wind chill factor inside of your actual vehicle. You're actually
Yeah.
creating a wind chill factor. Kevin, just for a moment here, as you know, Lindsey is not going to be joining me this week. However, she is on her way to Belize, and she is joining us now from the airport as she's getting ready to leave. We kind of keep things loosey goosey. Hey, Lindsey, tell Lindsey good morning.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I never get to talk to the other Lindsay, and I hate there being two Lindsays. So I just wanted to clear it up. That you're EY, I think, right?
Yes.
I am.
All right, so
Yes.
we're good. All right, then we're all good. We're all good. Well, no wind chill factor is going to be an issue where I'm heading in Belize. But I just wanted to check in and say hi. And also, I have to tell you both, I had an issue with my TSA pre wasn't connected to my boarding pass, so it was a whole deal. I could not find any person that worked at the airport walking around that didn't have earbuds in, and then when I finally got them to take them out and talk to me, knew the answers to my questions. And I was so taken aback by it, about like the disconnection side of things, and it makes me even more grateful for people like Kevin, Lindsay, who have all the answers. So that's where I'm at, guys. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to have you, by the way. And it's just like I said, it's really funny because I kept thinking about this too. Going to the airport these days, you're like, does anybody really work here, or are you all just showing up for a paycheck and
Seriously.
checked out? I mean, that's my feeling sometimes when I go through TSA now. It's like I either get these really warm and wonderful people, or I get people who give me kind of menacingly blank stares. I don't know if that was your feeling.
Yeah,
That's kind of it, isn't it?
100%. The woman, I had to find the American desk, and literally the woman who works for the airport, she told me she didn't know where it was. I'm like, well, that feels like day one information that you get on the job. Like what? So yeah, I feel you. It's
Yeah.
discombobulated, but it's all good.
Yeah. That's why I don't like flying. It really has nothing to
Yeah,
do with the flying portion of it. It's dealing with the airport and people most of the time,
yeah.
because you feel like you're in the town of Stepford sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
And you never know what you're going to get. Different airports, different gates, different
Yeah.
airlines, people's, and then at the end of the day, it's people. I'm like, which side of the
Yeah.
bed did you get out of today? Is it the one that wants to talk to me or the other? Usually it's the other. So
I had a friend of mine one time got himself a good old pat down. You know what he told one of the TSA inspectors? He said, the difference between you and me, he said, I finally figured it out. He said, you don't want to be here and you're stuck here and I'm going someplace wonderful. Yep, let's get a pat down going right now. Let's just kind of give you the answer.
exactly.
And I have to
That's
kind of,
probably what it was.
yeah.
They saw my ticket going to the Belize and they're like, screw her, make it hard.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I got to be here dealing with you people. You get to go to Belize. Really quickly, Lindsey, tell everybody what it is exactly you're doing over in Belize.
Yeah, really exciting. It's called Camp Belize. It's a Texas country music festival put on by Django Walker, who is Jerry Jeff Walker's son. And there'll be people like Pat Green and Jack Ingram performing, which are guys that I grew up on in Texas. They would play like my high school and college dances and mixers. So I love this crew of people. I'm going with actually Russell Stubbs, who's in the trucking industry. His wife, Dawn Stubbs, is a good friend of mine, a rancher out of Texas. These are trucking people, longtime trucking royalty, I like to call them. So they'll be with some Texas folks, some trucking folks, and some really good music folks. And I'm really excited about it. Going to, quite frankly, not only write with some people and look for some new connections in that, but new connections to bring on the show, both on Road Gang Radio and We Should Write. So this is a R&D trip, research and development, I will call it, with a sunshine and beach in the background. So I don't hate it.
That's your story, and you're sticking to it. We love you.
Yes, sir.
It's good to have you. Go have a great time. We will hold down the fort for you. Phone Master Dre and I are on the case, and with people like Kevin Lindsey, spelled with an E, here on the home fires, keeping the home fires burning, we might just make it to the other side without you, but it's going to be tough. We love you.
You can do it. If I come back and Kevin Lindsey's your new co-host, I will understand.
I will fight.
I will still call in. I'll still call in regularly.
Thank you, Lindsey. We love you. Be safe.
We love you, boo.
Bye, guys. Love. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Glad she's out of here. Jeez.
Yeah, and now we're back to cold intake. I mean, she took all the warm air with her. It's 71 degrees this morning in Belize, just to give you guys a sense of what she's going into. And when we last left off with Kevin Lindsey, who, of course, is in charge of maintenance over at TravelCenters of America, joining us this morning here on Maintenance Matters, we were actually talking about opening the door and letting that first blast of cold air in. Kevin made the really good insight that you're essentially inducing wind chill factor into your engine. So the question becomes, this is a maintenance thing, how do we make sure from an approach that when we start that up we do as little damage as we possibly can? What is the counter?
Well, I don't know that there's a
Exactly.
really good counter,
Right.
but it is, it is possible to first of all, don't rev that engine up, as it once it fires up. It's a diesel engine. Either it's going to fire or it's not. There's no throttle body on it like on a gasoline or engine or anything. So hitting the throttle's really doing nothing. All that is a sensor. It's all wires nowadays. It's because if you do that, you can speed that engine up quicker than it really needs to be. Even before there's lubrication to everything. And sometimes it's a blessing when it don't fire off immediately, that it turns over a few times, because as it turns over, it's actually building oil pressure better and quicker. The more it turns over, because it's got your oil pump going, that's getting that lubrication. Because when it does get cold outside, when that engine is set, overnight or all night or whatever, as it gets cold, that oil, falls back down out of all of these places that it's in, so, and because of the temperature, even though it may be thicker, it's still, you got to remember, all the metal and everything it's up against is contracting as well. So it creates more space, which allows it to fall back down in a little bit more. So, so just be careful with that. Don't just fire it up and, rev that thing up 1,500, 2,000 RPMs. It's not good for it at all.
What I love about what you just said, by the way, and it really is groovy, is the fact that I've thought about that on mornings when I always wonder why when I go to start my car, it's my car, and I get like nothing's wrong with it. I take care of it, but it takes a little bit longer to start up, and so basically it's like the process of turning over. You shouldn't panic about it. That it's okay if it takes a little bit longer because it's doing what it should be doing at that point, and not to overreact. And if it simply pops to life, that might be really cool, and you might feel like, oh, I got it going on. But it also might be doing more damage than taking a little bit of time to kind of, sputter its way into reality. And I wasn't aware of that. That's a big deal. And that, to me, in a lot of ways, is a great reminder that sometimes we can't stop the damage, but we can mitigate it. And we make the joke all the time. Turning it on in and of itself is a destructive act. It has to be because entropy is just the reality of the world. Every time we run, we wear ourselves down a little bit. We also build muscle, but we wear ourselves down a little bit. And it's a great reminder that sometimes the best way to kind of handle this is simply take your time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's starting it up is almost an unavoidable problem. That's the reality of it. But once it gets going, the stuff that we put into it, the stuff that we put in our engine, the stuff that we actually do in regards to maintenance can serve as mitigation in regards to viscosity and fuel and additives and all that kind of stuff. So kind of talk about that in regards to the choices people should make about what should be in their engine when it actually starts up on a cold day.
Well, I hear so many different things from different, drivers, owner operators, fleets, and manufacturers. Most engine manufacturers don't really recommend necessarily any particular additives to engine oils or fuels or anything like that, because what you got to remember in the manufacturing world, when they make, they design these engines, these parts for these engines and everything, and they're all designed around certain scenarios, right? And they want them to last, even though they're in the business of manufacturing parts and pieces, they want them to last, a good period so that, the consumer, the drivers, the fleets, whatever, have a good feeling about their product. But at the same time, they know they're only going to last so long under certain conditions. So, when they test, a lot of the engineering that goes into different components and everything, when they test all this stuff, they know it's going to have a certain life. It can only do this. A lot of people don't realize this, but it's something as simple as a little small toggle switch. Manufacturers that make those switches know there's only so many times it can get turned on and off before it's going to fail. It has a lifespan. Everything has some sort of lifespan. And, the average is usually based off of, doing things this way and all these different conditions. And the cold really, really adds to that. That always decreases the lifespan. Extreme temperatures, one way or the other, whether it's really cold outside, whether it's really hot, can, there's an area there that everything likes to kind of live in, kind of that comfort zone, kind of like we all have as people, right? We have our own comfort zone. So.
Yeah, that natural harmonics has to be achieved through testing too, though. That's the other thing too. Is
that's right. That's right.
And we're not. By the way, guys, we're not talking about deliberatively built-in obsolescence. What Kevin is referring to is the fact that even the best-made things eventually wear down and wear out. Because when it comes to the kind of stuff that you work on, those things have to be built to last, but they're also built with the understanding that even the best things don't last. And so, at some point, things break. And they break through no fault of anybody's but the fact that things break. That being said, there are ways to mitigate those breaks, and also there are ways to check on things to make sure. That's the other thing, too, is that as we go back to our original thing when we started the adventure talking about winter, is that there's a lot you can do before the winter begins to make sure that the things that look like they may be closer to breaking than you thought get replaced to start the winter with. A lot of the stuff you were talking about really kind of needs to get taken care of that way. And by the time you get to the winter, if you haven't done that, if stuff's on the edge anyway, there's not much you can do about it but deal with it when it happens. We talk about the idea of getting your batteries tested. That's a big thing too in regards to going backwards, in regards to all that, in regards to the intake and all that stuff. And we talk about the idea of having not only the correct batteries but also checking those connections. That's a big thing too, because once again, it might not be the worst situation, but in fact, if you don't have it in the best situation, you're always looking for ways to slow down the speed at which everything wears out. That's really what it kind of comes down to, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's kind of what a good maintenance program is about. Things are going to wear out. They're going to wear. They're going to break, but try to mitigate that as much as possible by, honestly, really paying attention to things, paying attention to small things. One of the things I do see that does get overlooked, going into cold weather. And then once you get into cold weather is, I was talking earlier about how things, it gets so cold, different things contract and everything. Think about those belts on that alternator.
I was just going to bring it up. There you go, man. There it is.
You've got this rubber impregnated stringy type thing that's actually turning a piece of metal that's actually fairly slick with grooves in it, right? So, the tension has to be real good. But when you stop and think about that, as it gets cold, that engine's been sitting there overnight, gets cold. Even that tension on that belt, these different things are contracting. Well, they're going to contract at different rates because now you're talking about, iron and steel and, cast aluminum, different things, components like that. And then you're talking about a belt that's primarily made of some sort of rubber, So those things are going to be at different levels.
Slippage.
So you could end up with some of that slippage. Yes, exactly. Which is kind of I don't know the right term here, maybe oxymoron, because if you end up with that slippage as it goes to start, guess what happens when that rubber slips across that metal? It creates a lot of friction, which now generates a lot of heat suddenly, but it's only in a certain spot. So
yeah, and by the way, really quickly, heat in a certain spot when the rest of the world is cold can actually cause damage too.
That's right.
I mean, it's like anytime you have an imbalance of temperatures and things, you're getting, like I said, that's why often people will, in the coldest of, I'll think about it like this. Once again, another analogy. Anybody who's ever not realized that we're too close to a fire during a really cold night often will have look at their hand and be like, what the hell, why do I have a first-degree burn on my hand? It's because they can't distinguish between what's happening on the nerve endings. And what you could get is you get a situation where you get something really, really hot with the rest of the world around it cold. Things like that tend to snap.
Yeah.
And that's the reality.
Yeah, and especially when it's really cold, right? Because that's about the same as, kind of freezing your skin with, Freon, liquid nitrogen, something like that, because it freezes, but it burns. It's kind of like that whole freezer burn type thing, right? But what that really means is there was a big variation in differences there that occurred too quickly that caused that.
Well, you're brittle.
It sounds,
anytime you change temperature rapidly, that's the other thing you got to think about. You're brittling things. You
Yes.
literally are drying them out incredibly rapidly. Both things are taking water out of it. That's what happens when you freeze.
For sure.
That's what you're doing. You are freezing stuff removes water from spaces. Burning stuff removes water by simply pulling it out. And both those things can create a real disaster. And the other thing is, to really quickly, cold batteries, just want to remind people, cold batteries are resistant to charging. That's an obvious thing we didn't get a chance to cover. We're almost out of time here. Really quickly, what do you want to talk about next week so we can kind of set the table for that? What you got in your mind? What are you thinking about?
Well, I'm thinking about going down the cold road again. I know we got another, looks like winter storm headed into us this weekend across the country. So it's going to be interesting, especially since I'm supposed to be making a trip to just south of Cleveland next week and teaching a class. I don't know.
Hey, you know what we could do, though? What we could do, and by the way, since you teach class here on a regular basis, let's talk a little bit about that, about how you actually teach class to both people who don't know a damn thing and people who actually know a lot.
Lord.
Yeah, I mean, that's a different, and by the way, that's a different kind of teaching, man. People don't realize that. Teaching people who don't know nothing about nothing, and teaching people who know everything about everything, and I don't mean that sarcastically, is a very different experience, because somebody said, if you don't think coaching in the NBA is hard, imagine the difference between telling a high school kid how to act and having them listen to you and having Marlon Brando and trying to explain to him how to act. That's what an NBA coach has to do. Kevin Lindsey, of course, is the guy in charge of maintenance over at TravelCenters of America, TA Petro. He joins us on a weekly basis, recurring basis, taking care of what is under your hood. We'll get to Highway to Health here in a little bit, but thank you, Kevin. Happy days, and don't forget